Before I start my talk, I'm going to invite each of you to drop those beautiful eyelids of yours for just a matter of a minute. And as you drop those beautiful eyelids, I want you to connect with your breath. The reason that you were able to be in this room together and share space. I would like you to express gratitude towards all of your senses, your ability to see and hear and feel and taste. Imagine for a moment if you couldn't see the rainbow. Imagine for a moment if you couldn't hear laughter. Imagine for a moment if you couldn't see your child or your spouse or your friend. Now shift that gratitude in towards your physical body, your heart, your lungs, your pancreas, your gallbladder, your liver, your circulatory system, your digestive system. All of these things that beautifully come together to allow your physical body to experience this world. And when you're in this space, I would like you to ask yourself one question. If I knew the exact date that I was going to die, would I be proud of how I've lived? If you came with an expiry date, would you be proud of everything that you've done? Or are there things that you wish you could do? And with that question in mind, I'll invite you to open your beautiful eyelids again. Sultan Valida said, "Every human being must be born twice, once through their mother's womb, and the second time through their own physical body. The essence of who you are is that rebirth." That rebirth came for me about 18, 19 months ago. I sat there on the couch of a life coach, feeling like a total idiot. Hypocritical, because I was a master coach myself, and there I sat, and I could not fix myself. So how could I coach others when I couldn't even fix myself? I sat there feeling lost, confused, empty, and for no reason at all. I was at the peak of my career. I was in strategic leadership roles in healthcare. There was no reason for me to feel like that, or I thought. So my coach asked me a question similar to what Dawn talked about. She said, "GV, why is there an either-or GV? There's a corporate GV that does organizational development work, and then there's GV that travels around the world every 3 months, teaching meditation and mindfulness and going to ashrams around the world. And no joke, I did that every 3 months. I would just leave." So she said, "Why are there 2 GVs?" And I looked at her and I said, "I have no freaking clue." Like, who asks you that? So I sat there and I thought, you know what? I think I need some processing time on this question because I have no idea. I came home and I thought, are there truly 2 GVs? Like, I thought I was pretty aligned. I thought I was coming into work being me. You know, everybody knew me to be this very unique GV that brought Lego to teach physicians how to communicate with their patients. Thought it was me. But that's when I learned that I was wearing a costume. So if you could imagine me standing here right now with this costume, a quilt-like costume that has patches on it. And I had zippered it so tight, so very similar to what everybody else was talking about the stories. Those patches were a story in my life. And I'll walk you through one story that was one patch of this costume. So at the age of 7, we went to boarding school in India, in a Catholic boarding school. My parents were here. I was born in Mission, BC, but we went to India to go to boarding school. I sat there at the age of 7 holding the hand of my sister, who was 4, at the edge of the bed. And we were staring at 2 metal trunks. One metal trunk said S550, and one metal trunk said P551. For the next 8 years, I would be S550, and my sister would be P551. So that costume, that patchwork that stayed on my costume was, I was angry towards my parents. Where was my choice? Nobody asked me at the age of 7 whether I wanted to go halfway across the world and my parents were here and I was in India. Nobody asked me. And then I came back to Canada. I had no choice when I came back to Canada either. Then I was arranged married, had no choice. So the patches continued, and the resentment and the guilt and the anger built. And then people were so magnificent in fixing my costume. So they would say to me, "Jeevee, that must really suck that you went to India by yourself." And I would be sitting there going, "Yeah, like it did suck." And then they'd say, "How did you stay away from your parents? Like, what were they thinking? I would never leave my kids." And I'd be like, "Yeah, that was pretty horrible." But what I didn't realize was they were putting on more buttons and zippering it even tighter. So what I realized on the couch of my coach was that I had zippered up that costume so tight that it was time to take the costume off. It was time to unzip it. And that unzipping sent me through a few months of dealing with shit and crap and letting go of things that I really didn't want to let go of because I eagerly adorned this costume. If I frickin' took the costume off, then who was I? If I'm not my boarding school story, if I'm not my arranged marriage story, if I'm not my divorce story, who am I? So if you could imagine, as I started to unzip, as I started to process every story, identify this with the story, why was I living that story? What was it serving? How could I turn it around? So the boarding school story became one of warriorship. I would not be standing here speaking in front of you guys if I didn't do improv theater in my boarding school. I would not be teaching physicians conflict resolution, leadership, team dynamics, change management if I was not a part of a dorm room with 100 girls arm distance apart. Because you better frickin' learn conflict resolution. Because you're only an arm distance apart of 100 girls. And I would not be doing that professionally had I not done that boarding school work. So as I took the costume off, there I stood, and this is the only way I can relate it. I felt like I was standing in New York Square, completely stark naked, and the entire world was whizzing around me. And there I stood, completely vulnerable, raw, and exposed, not knowing what this meant for me, not knowing what it meant for me going forward. So then I started to drop the stories. I was no longer going to be a story. I was only going to be the person that I could be in that moment in time. That was it. No past was going to define me. No future was going to define me. I was going to drop my values, no morals, no beliefs, all of that stuff you carry around in a backpack, respect, integrity, honesty, all of those things we carry around. And yet, if I was faced with actually facing that value, and my son or my daughter needed medication and I had no money, I would steal in a heartbeat. So where'd that value go then? Did I decide that I didn't want to use it anymore? So why was I carrying around all this stuff in the backpack? So I decided that day I would be only what I could be in each moment in time. So I stand here before you today, walking that hero's journey of having the calling, of feeling empty, lost, confused, going through the resistance of the calling. I can't teach corporate mindfulness. People are going to think I'm crazy. How do I go from wearing a business suit to woo-woo land? So total resistance to the calling. And then, was I ever tested? Part of the hero's journey is that test. Financially, I tested. I was a single mom, 2 kids in university, and had no clue how I was going to make it. But here I am, coming out the other end of the hero's journey in transformation. So my ask of each and every one of you today is that if you are anywhere on that continuum of the hero's journey, please chat with me. Spend 30 minutes with me on the phone. There's no obligation. Just pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Jeevee, this is the biggest obstacle I have in my life right now. How can you help me shift it into an opportunity?" And my big purpose is to impact the 5 minutes when someone opens the door from a workday and comes home. I want those 5 minutes to be absolutely beautiful for every single person. So you enter your home with grace and with ease, not annoyed and frustrated and on edge. So if you're with me on this journey, I would truly appreciate you reaching out and saying, just informally, I have a problem, GV, help me out. Thank you.